on the YouTubes.
And the YouTubians.
Yeah, it says we're going live. It says we are live as you're snapping fingies. All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Behind the Scenes of AV Rant. Things seem to be working okay with this OBS stuff, so you will actually see the pictures we're talking about. Still have the link down below in the show notes there. And
can anybody see me when I do this? Can I do that?
Should be able to. It's funny watching. I've got your video from Skype up there, and then a couple seconds later, the YouTube live feed shows whatever we did. But I think that's working. And all right, there we go. Let's see. Anything else? Everything recording? Audio's recording? Video's recording?
So I don't have to record video, right?
No, you don't have to record video. You just have to record your audio.
Okey-dokey.
And as long as my audio is recording, and it is, okay, start whenever you please.
Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. I'm Tom Andry, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AV Rant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. I had a really busy weekend, and I was house sitting for my sister's family while they were away on a family vacation, and so very little home theater stuff. But I plowed through. I didn't mean to. I plowed through all of She-Ra's third season, which is only 6 episodes. It's like
I'm still working on season 2, but that's not why I had a busy weekend. Noah. So
your
I
son.
Did not. No, Noah's my son, but that's not why he's coming over.
That was just
watch out for my coffee down there. All right, don't spill my coffee. All right, here we go.
Stuff just going on the side. All right.
Come here.
Ha.
If you're watching the YouTube video, you will be seeing little Violet. Violet is a brand new 11-week-old puppy that we got from Friends of Strays shelter.
Mm-hmm.
She is not housebroken, not lead trained, and nothing but very cute. She's also pretty smart. She's from either St. Thomas or St. Croix or one of those islands.
Okay.
They got like a whole bunch of strays there, and they ship them in to Friends of Strays to get them homes over here. And they're all kind of terrier mixes. She doesn't really bark. She only barks when she wants to play. We had a big old thunderstorm this morning, and while she wasn't super happy about it, she wasn't like completely freaking out, which is good for Florida. But she's just a little thing. So everybody say hi to Violet.
Hi, Violet.
They actually named her Virgo, which I think is a stupid name. So we changed it to Violet. Since she's 11 weeks old.
She'll learn her new name. That'll be absolutely fine. Well, that's very cute. It's also going to most likely mean distractions in future podcasts, one would expect. But
one would expect. All right. Hand her back to my son. Close the door on your way out. Everybody be quiet. I'm podcasting.
While we're talking about pets, how's Daisy doing?
She's doing good. She's doing good. In fact, my wife was like, oh, well, we can't forget about Daisy, so let's let Daisy out. So we let Daisy out to roam around, which is what we do every once in a while. And she kind of roams around and gets lost, and we have to find her behind some furniture. Usually what happens. We'll forget about her. But we let her out, and then Violet was outside trying to get her to pee because, that's the only way you can housebreak a puppy if you don't have older dogs to teach them what to do. And so Violet came in, and she's been around other slightly larger dogs and other smaller dogs, and she's been around aggressive dogs and some cats.
Mm-hmm.
And she's been fine with everything. So she walked in and she's like, first of all, Daisy looks just like the floor. she has a very similar
might
color.
not know who Daisy is. That's your bearded dragon lizard. That's
my bearded dragon lizard. That's right, newer listeners. She's a bearded dragon lizard, and she's we had her on the floor, and she was kind of sitting there, and Violet wasn't really sure what that was, and she walked over, and Daisy backed up, and her beard just went boom and exploded.
Right.
Like, big, don't make me bite you. I'm like, you are the laziest lizard I've ever seen. You ain't biting nobody. Don't lie.
It got some reaction, though. I was dealing with pets, too, because my sister and her family, they have cats, so I was looking after kitty cats and plants. That's why I was house sitting. Fun stuff.
We picked up Violet at like 4 o'clock on Sunday.
Yeah.
And then, by 10 a.m. on Monday, I had her at the vet to make sure she had all the right. They told me that she had all the right shots, but I don't believe anybody. So I took her in, made sure that she was free of intestinal parasites, made sure she was up on all those shots, all of that. Made sure we got on a regimen that we were supposed to get on. Looks really healthy, free of intestinal parasites. She's just starting to settle in. She's just starting to really start playing, and she still won't enter a room at all.
Takes some time.
Like go through doorways, basically. She's not real thrilled with car rides either, but we're going to work on that. All right, this is AV Rant, the podcast. It's all about my pets.
Yep.
No, it's all about AV and home theater and answering your questions about said things. If you want to get your question answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. You go to www.avrant.com. Leave us a comment there. Facebook.com/AVRant podcast. YouTube.com/AVRant, where you can't leave a comment because YouTube's full of awful people. Sorry. Not awful people who watch, awful people who comment. Because I think all the normal people just watch and go, I'm not even scrolling down. I don't even look at the comments
There
anymore.
are clearly many more viewers than commenters. So,
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That one dude's super angry, though. He's got lots of accounts. He's super angry. And then contact Rob directly. It's rob@avrant.com. His Twitter's @firstreflect. I'm Tom @avrant.com. My Twitter's @avrant_Tom. There's so many bugs in this house. So we got the door open constantly trying to get her to go in and out, by herself. We're like coaxing her with food and praising her when she does stuff. So she'll get it. She'll get it. Hopefully.
They always do.
They do.
Take some time.
All right. Let's thank our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, you have to support the podcast in some way. One of the ways you can do that is going to patreon.com/AVRant podcast, I think. Is that right? Yes.
Yep.
So we got 84 patrons over there. Patreon is a service where it's like a voluntary subscription to our podcast.
It's an automatic monthly donation you sign up for.
So we have 84 patrons over there. You had 83 last month. DJ and Brandon both mentioned that they were one of our patrons. I gotta kill this bug. I missed it. Brandon signed up specifically after I quoted "Better Off Dead" for the "I Want My $2." I have seen that movie quite literally hundreds of times. I've seen it so many times.
It's the Paperboy, right? Paperboy wants his $2.
Yeah, the Paperboy wants his $2. It's okay. So it's got John Cusack in it, but back in the day, VHS, my parents, they pirated a copy of that movie off.
I see.
They rented a double VCR player and then rented a bunch of movies, I guess, or borrowed movies from friends. And that was one of the movies that we got. So I watched it hundreds of times. I've seen it so much. I've also seen The Little Mermaid an embarrassingly large number of times. So, I'm well-rounded as a person. So, yes, I want my $2. The drag racing scene, there's just so many good scenes. Keys! I love that part where he's trying to find the right key. Anyways, so if you haven't seen that movie, it's probably super racist by now or something. It probably didn't age well.
I don't remember.
I don't remember there being anything bad in it, but, it probably was. I mean, nothing's
usually is some casual stuff going on in older
casual
movies.
Racism,
That was just
sexism, misogyny,
homophobia, definitely for sure.
Yeah. Revenge of the Nerds is not a movie that you can watch anymore.
No, oh man, yeah, that is problematic.
It's got some issues there. Anyways, so Brandon also said I guess he also asked about getting a B-stock monoprice monolith 3-channel amp instead of an Outlaw Model 5000, since it wasn't that much more expensive. We said the 6-watt Outlaw. He, of course, doing exactly what we expected, he bought the monolith. In fact, I think he may have bought the monolith before he answered the question. But
very likely.
Yeah.
That's all right. It'll do you an excellent stead. You will not be disappointed with a Monolith 3. Not at all. So that's all right.
Just like the dude who asked a question on Facebook this month, and I was like, short answer, your AV receiver's fine. You don't need the amps. And then it's like big, long wall of text. I'm like, this dude's buying an amp. I don't know why.
I don't know if we'll get to that question, but it is on the list.
All right. I want to also thank Terry, who heard about Rob recommending the CAF HTF 8003 speaker bar for 2 episodes in a row. So he ordered one from Accessories for Less and told them he heard about it from us. So thank you to Terry, as well as our patrons over at patreon.com.
That's right. So I thank all 84 patrons, including DJ and Brandon. And thank you, Terry, for talking us up to Accessories for Less. And if you'd like to make a one-time donation, you can do that via PayPal if you'd like to. Just come to avrant.com, and over on the right-hand side, it says Support AV Rant, and there's a picture of a cup of coffee, and it'll take you to PayPal. You can send a one-time donation that way if you'd like to.
All right, so it's the news here. Let's begin with some sad news. Jeremy Kipnis, creator of Kipnis Studio Standard and the Guinness World Record holder for most complex home theater and video game system, passed away at age 54. He suffered a heart attack while swimming in Lake Carmel. So he wasn't crushed by a speaker, which would be the proper way for somebody who owns that kind of world records to die. But
might prefer to go that way, and he had the equipment to do it.
Yeah, no.
If you're not familiar with Jeremy Kipnis, Tom will describe. Yep.
Is that the guy who had all the tower speakers all the way around his little system?
12 tower speakers.
And monoblock amps for each one.
Monoblock tube amplifiers for each one. Yes.
Cable.
They might have been
big,
stereo
massive
tube.
cables for everything. The picture they always show of that dude's system has no cables anywhere. The one that's the most famous one, like, look at all this stuff. I'm like, look how it's not hooked up to anything.
At the moment for the picture, yes. When it is hooked up, it's Spaghetti Monster.
Spaghetti Monster, but man, I can't believe that dude actually has the most complex. I mean, I gotta believe that somebody out there has got something more complex. It's just,
but maybe didn't submit it to Guinness.
Stuff. Yeah. Anyways, a $6 million screening room featuring 22-foot
$6 million $6
million screening room featuring 22-foot screen, 12 full-range towers, and 20 18-inch subwoofers was featured in many publications. So with his insistence on using nothing but tube amplification to power all of his audio equipment, even the subs.
I believe so, because those appear to be passive subwoofers, as far as I can tell.
How much AC was in that room?
Well, coming up.
Famously had 2 electrical transformer boxes, the type that would normally power an entire neighborhood, installed on his property, racking up a monthly power bill of roughly $1,200 a month. Most of it went through the tube amplifiers into the air as heat, and then through the AC into the air as cooling.
Yeah, on his website, he said one of these transformers is for digital equipment and the other transformer is for analog equipment. And I'm like, with the amount of analog equipment you have, one of those transformers is doing a whole lot more work than the one powering the digital stuff only. So I think you should share.
Yeah, well, whatever. He's survived by his wife, Carolina, who currently has a lot of stuff on sale on eBay right now.
Well, it's very sad news. That's way too young to be.
That is way too young. 54 is
passing away. Yeah, that is not
so
at all. No.
Our condolences to his family.
Very much so.
We all suffer from the same sickness he suffered from, which is home theater.
If we had the money, we might be just as nuts. It's not impossible at all.
Well, yeah, I don't know that I would have the exact same layout of equipment that he had, but I would certainly have spent a stupid amount of money on home theater. Believe me, this home theater would be the size. My home theater would be the size of my current house.
There's nothing that drastically less crazy about, say, a massive JBL synthesis system with $10,000 a piece speakers and the processor they have that's based off of Trinov. I would have liked to have seen what he would have done to convert this whole space into Atmos. What would have happened then?
I don't know how you hang all those towers from the ceiling.
He would have found a way.
He would have done.
Yes.
All right. News from Nick. Ascend launched their new variant of the Sierra 2 bookshelf speakers, the Sierra 2 EX. Same tweeter, 7 cabinet, but new woofer and crossover. The new woofer includes a phase plug, because they're cool, and even lighter, more rigid cone, and a more powerful magnet. It can play both higher and lower than the original Sierra 2 woofer. So the bass extension is deeper now, and there's a higher roll-off between the tweeter and the new woofer, leading to lower distortion at very high output levels, which is good. The price goes up by $200 a pair to $1,648, but they're being offered at intro pricing at $1,498, only a $50 price increase over the current model. There are also upgrade kits for the Sierra 1. Those are $500 each, and Sierra 2, $328 for their owners. Nick wonders, will Rob be first in line? No.
I mean, as I'm an Ascend fan, I own 11 Ascend speakers. I am a crazy person with ribbons in all 11 of those speakers, but I mean, as nuts as I am, I can find no justification in my teeny tiny little room setup for, I mean, the reason you would go for this new design is that it essentially can play louder, or at least higher output with less distortion. I mean, that's what the new woofer allows. It's the same
slightly more extension up top and a slightly more extension on the bottom end, which you don't need because of your enormous subwoofers.
That's right. So, that's what it's about, comparing it to the original one. I mean, the development on the woofer of the original Sierra 2 was quite a project, and then he works very closely with Seas out of Norway, and they're like, well, we've kept refining. We can do even more. We can make it even lighter, more rigid, more power handling, play higher, play lower, all this stuff. So he's like, heck yeah, let's go ahead and offer that. So that's great for someone who's, say, using their Sierra 2s as their front speakers, and maybe they're getting close to 12 or more feet away. Potentially this could have some benefit for those people. But for me, where my surround speakers are nearly close enough for me to reach out to other side and touch them, I definitely don't need higher output volume.
How many seats? I know I've asked you this before. How many seats do you have in your theater?
3. I have a couch. All 3 seats recline, but it's a couch.
Oh, I have 3 seats in my. Each seat is big enough for 2 butts, but I've got 3 seats in my home theater. We can get all 5 of us on the couch.
You would not be able to fit 5 people on my couch.
3 adults, 2 child-sized butts.
Maybe 4. Maybe 2 adults, 2 kids could squeeze in on my couch, but that'd be it.
Okay. I was just wondering when I come over there if I'm gonna have any place to sit, because I'm sitting in the middle.
If it's just me and you, absolutely. So yeah, there you go. It's a variant of the Sierra 2. Don't think of these as an entirely new speaker. I would think the best way to conceptualize this is we now have a Luna, which is the mini version, the Sierra 2, which is the regular version, and the Sierra 2 EX, which is the I want these speakers, but I need extra output. And that's the way I would think of it.
Okay. All right, Ian, this is getting to the questions now.
We missed a comment from Carl, though.
Where's Carl? Oh, I scrolled past him.
We did.
Oh, all right, here we go. Carl mentioned, he heard me mention how I might like to switch our behind-the-scenes live recording sessions over to Twitch instead of YouTube Live. So he shared a recent home theater review article that talks about how Amazon, who owns Twitch, has pulled official Twitch app support off of almost all streaming boxes except for the Fire TV on Roku in particular. Even third-party apps that use Twitch's API have been pulled, so just something to consider. Whatever. It's going to come back around. Doesn't make any difference.
One would think that's a strange decision. They're like, well, Twitch is popular, so let's make it basically available only on our own hardware. I'm like, but that makes no sense for a streaming service. Hopefully it'll come back at some point, but
it'll come back.
I don't know. Yeah. We'll look into it. But
maybe it's doing something with the encoding or something like that.
Maybe, Anyway, links for articles that we mention and pictures and stuff like that is over on our website, avrant.com. So
all right, sorry about that, Carl. I didn't mean to skip you there, buddy. All right, let's get into the questions here. Ian first wanted to thank Richard Gunther and Rob for discussing his plans to use a 160-inch motorized 16:9 screen with motorized side masking to act as a pseudo 4-way masking system. First, he has some responses to the things that they, not me, suggested. So he reached out to Seymour AV, suggesting they said they believe they can make him a screen using 2 separate motors, one for the screen and the second one for just the masking. Combined with a more advanced 5-channel remote control units, they said they should be able to create intermediate stops for both the screen and the side masks this way. So that sounds promising and awesome and also expensive. So
I mean, I'm pretty sure they are borrowing that from their Seymour Screen Excellence, because I was mentioning how the Seymour Screen Excellence versions of the screens are a little bit more complex and can do a few more things. So, but I mean, it's all the same company. It's all run by the same people. Seymour Screen Excellence and Seymour AV. Seymour AV being the consumer-facing brand, and Screen Excellence being the installer-facing brand. But
Chris Seymour, who's he's a great guy. So I have no qualms sending business his way 100%.
Oh yeah, and definitely anytime you've got an idea in mind, you reach out and you talk to them, because they are enthusiasts who want to see stuff happen if you want it to happen. So good.
So anyways, he took Rob's suggestion to just use 2 16:9 screens. What? Why was I not around to fix this? Anyways, one bigger, one smaller, no masking under advisement. He agrees that the Epson 5040 UB's black levels are pretty darn great, but he can still notice them. Okay. He wants even blacker black bars. Seymour AV said they could put their black velvet over the top casing of the screen, so when the screen is partially rolled up, to make it a 2.35:1 aspect ratio, he can have velvet along the top edge. So that's on the case.
Yep. Right. On the case itself, it becomes the top mask.
That'd be a true 4-way masking screen, is, as we suspected, out of his price range. But now that Seymour AV says they can do all of this, he's quite excited. I'd be excited too, but it's, clearly he's discussed price. So whatever it is, he's happy with the price. So good on him.
Well, it's still considerably less expensive than a 4-way motorized masking screen.
Right, and just putting the masking along the top of the case is actually pretty brilliant. It's just you have to have a
velvet cover,
Yeah, you just have to make sure that you've got a projector that has lens shift
the motorized stuff, which the Epson 5040 does. Yep.
So Richard was correct that if he just goes directly into the picture mode selection screen, it starts with whatever the current picture mode is. So it would be difficult to program a harmony sequence to select any given desired picture mode. But thankfully, if he just goes into the settings menu, it always starts at the top menu. So he can create a harmony sequence from there. It might be a lot of programmed button presses, but he can make a sequences to select any desired lens memory or picture mode. And with the Epson's 10 lens memories and 10 picture settings memories, which include the lamp mode, he can make it work. So there we go. All that stuff is just things that are updates. We haven't even gotten to the questions.
Now we're on to questions, though.
So he asks, is there anything he can do to get better consistency with the lens memories and the motorized lens adjustments? He's finding that when he switches lens positions using the lens memories, it doesn't always go to the exact position he has set. With a 160-inch image, it doesn't have to be off by much to be easily noticeable. His current screen and his projector are both mounted on wood beams, and with the high temperatures, he's wondering if just the expansion and contraction of the wood is actually what's causing the slight lens drift. Is he correct about that, or should he expect that the Epson's lens memories just aren't that precise? My guess is that the latter.
Yeah, I know that they aren't literally pixel perfect in those lens memories.
Well,
with the motorization.
Considering you're looking at a consumer level projector, this is not a top of the line. Something that you're going to put in a theater or something like that. It's gonna have a little drift. It's the $2,500 to $3,000 sort of price range when it's MSRP. So yeah, we aren't talking about multi-megabuck projectors. But I will say, I'll say it'll never probably get you absolute pixel perfect. If you're looking for literal pixel perfect, you probably can't do that. But if you were to set a lens memory position that is essentially outside the range of any of the lens memories that you actually want to use, and sort of use that as a starting point. So, I mean, basically, move the lens like all the way up or all the way down or something like that, and then the zoom all the way out or all the way in, and call that like starting position. And then from there, choose one of the lens memories that you actually want to use. It tends to get closer that way versus, just moving between the actual lens memory positions that you want, which could be small differences. Just overthrow it. It's a little bit more than don't try to get it perfectly up to the edge. Just overcast it just a little bit, so it's casting a little bit on that black border, and that will give you a little bit of wiggle room there. I like your suggestion. If you set it so that at the beginning of every one of your sequences, it goes back up to something, whatever that something is, but all top left. Yeah, I mean, all the way at the top, all the way on the left, so that that motor is going to always be doing the same action. Right. I think that'll probably help, but just overshoot it a little, just a tiny bit more than maybe you're trying. And
it does slow things down, though. Of course, if you're moving the lens all the way in one direction, and
you gotta do it once at the beginning of this. You do it beginning of what you want. You just do it one time.
Yep. But sometimes people get impatient, so just a warning that would happen.
Projector takes like 10 seconds to warm up enough so that I even get an image. And sometimes if the power is flicked, the Xbox One will be like, oh, by the way, I'm turning it back on, so you might want to get yourself a beverage, maybe a sandwich. So he got his Epson 5040 UB from Epson's Clearance Center, so he was extremely happy with the price, which is about $1,250 after tax, which is like half of what Rob just said. And he thought he couldn't possibly be happier with his performance for what he paid, but then he's committed the sin of reading more reviews and comparisons after his purchase. How many times do we have to say it, dude? After you buy something, the internet is persona non grata. You may not look for anything ever again. Here to say that the Pro Cinema 6040 UB is exactly the same as the 5040, except for the black levels. They include spare lamp and the longer warranty.
Well, actually, black outer case, not the black levels. But the
black case.
Because the 5040 UB has a white outer case, and the 6040 has a black outer case.
Who cares? But reading reviews and the manuals, it seems it does have a feature not found in the 5040, a lens iris. Both the 5040 and the 6040 have an auto iris, and they both offer 3 lamp modes, but the lens iris, only found in the 6040, gives you 20 stops to perfectly dial in the amount of light hitting your screen. How important is this? Would it be worth paying a minimum of $500 more? He could easily sell his 5040. I think it's zero important. That's how much importance I place on it.
Yeah,
Rob may have different opinion of it, but my thing is, you don't really have the equipment necessary to know exactly how much light you need to be shooting out.
Yeah,
of
I mean, this
thing.
is like if someone is trying to use this for almost like demonstrating work that they've done,
Right.
where they're trying to like show it to a client or something. Because I mean, the Epson 5040 or 6040, neither of them is precise enough to be like something you would do your actual color grading on, but it might be
Right.
something you would use to show clients the end result or close to the end result to sort of get their approval on a gigantic screen that a little 30-inch mastering monitor could never show you that type of scale. So it could be something like that, and there you're having to dial in like the exact number of nits, right? And you would need something with that more granular control like what that 6040 is offering. Also, I know there are people who enjoy having the manual lens iris because then they can start with the lamp when it's brand new and actually have the lens iris close down a bit, and as the lamp dims slowly over age, they gradually open up that manual
Right.
lens iris to keep
Right.
the light level very close to the same throughout. So I mean, that's about it. That's about all I could say to justify a minimum of $500 more, and that's having to get a refurbished 6040 somehow, on top of that, which the refurbished one probably wouldn't be coming with all of the extras that would normally come with it, the extra spare lamp and the ceiling mount and all that type of stuff. So I have a very difficult time justifying that for a regular user. I mean, you do have the auto iris, you do have the various lamp modes, you do have your regular brightness and contrast adjustments in the picture settings menu. For me, that's well more than enough that I never even paid attention to. Yes, this does exist. There is this one tiny feature difference. I never even noticed it because it wouldn't matter to me personally. But yeah.
And if it doesn't matter to Rob, it don't matter to you. Because Rob cares about a lot of crap that doesn't matter.
But if you're going to have a light meter set up at all times and you're constantly monitoring your nit levels and it's just going to bother you to no end that you can't dial it in perfectly, then I suppose.
Right. If you got 20 grand to spend on the light meter, then knock yourself out.
That's right.
All right, Andrew. First up, Andrew sent us a really nice message about the positive impact our podcast has had for him. He feels like the whole AV Rant community helped him build his home theater, since other people had many of the same questions he had. And since he posts some of his own YouTube videos, he appreciates just how much work he knows we must put in every week. That is true.
It is at least a full work day of work spread across multiple days, because it's not as though I do the whole thing in one day. But it's at least a full work day put in every week.
Yeah, I don't quite do that, but I've got you should be actually reducing your workload now with the new OBS setup, right?
Well, the lion's share is just putting together the show notes, so that's considerably more.
True.
It is a slight reduction. It's not as much editing on the video anymore.
So when he built his home theater, he was finishing his entire basement. He applied something we recommended, which was to focus on the room itself and spend the lion's share of his budget there. So he skimped on his home theater gear budget-wise for the time being, but he's really happy with the room. And just like we said, searching for B stock and deals, he was still able to put together a great sounding system using Paradigm monitor speakers. You got your budget speakers were Paradigm monitors?
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Not bad. Not too shabby.
Yeah, I was budget shopping for cars, so I came home with a Lexus. Oh, nice. Okay.
I mean, monitor is their entry to the full size, but
Paradigm and entry and budget level speakers are not usually things I hear in the same sentence. So I'm laughing because this guy did fantastic. So he got he said he got put together a great sound system using Paradigm monitor speakers that he got for next to nothing, and now he's starting to upgrade a little at a time. Well, I'm going to tell you, you're going to have to spend a whole lot more than nothing to get better than Paradigm monitor speakers.
Especially since this is not an enormous room by the looks of things. Yep.
All right, so we can see the before and the after here. I'm not sure what I'm looking at exactly because it looks like the TV got bigger.
The TV definitely got bigger. Yep, and we can see the lovely drivers on those Paradigm monitor speakers. So before heading in there and after, not a tremendous change, but an upgrade has been made nonetheless.
So he went with a Denon S720W receiver B stock purely for budget reasons. The only thing bugging him a little bit in the back of his mind is that it only has Odyssey multi-Q, no XT, no XT32. Otherwise, he's found it to be a great receiver, easily powering his efficient monitor speakers. And following Rob's 12-step guide to setting up dual subwoofers, doesn't even miss not having independent dual subwoofer outputs. So is he really missing anything? His room is perfectly rectangular and enclosed, and if he's being honest, the room correction doesn't seem to be working very hard if you compare it on versus off. It made the most difference with his surround speakers and seemed to do a great job with those. So is there any reason or justification for upgrading his receiver right now? What's the lowest tier of room correction you consider if he's going to upgrade? All right, so the things I would consider in general, not speaking about you personally, but connectivity, making sure that your receiver passes through all the things that it needs to pass through in order for you to have the things that you need to have. Having enough HDMI outputs, features, if you're specifically looking for HEOS or looking for, Yamaha's case, the Music Cast, if you're looking for, AirPlay or whatever they're calling it these days over at Apple, or, Bluetooth connectivity or something like that, making sure it has all those features.
Sure.
Your room is not huge, so power is not really a consideration. Your monitors are not a power hungry speaker to begin with.
Not at all, yeah.
And likely if your room is pretty rectangular, and I don't see much room correction in here, just glancing at what I can see, but I see some, which means there's probably more.
Yes, yeah. We're only seeing the front of the room here, so the most of it is on the side and back walls, as we would have recommended. So yeah.
Right. So he's got a couple of what looks like they look like foam, but they could be something else.
Up front, yeah. That was probably a looks decision, and that's perfectly fine. But yeah, put a rug down on the floor. Yeah.
He's got a rug on the floor. He's got comfy couch, plush, not leather. Likely your room. I don't know where his subs are placed. Are they? There's
definitely one front and just slightly to the left of the center speaker. So I'm guessing he followed all our other advice. Is probably at the back of the room, just slightly to the right.
Which means that, your room correction probably isn't doing a ton, at least in the bass department.
That's the whole idea, yeah. You get the room done well, and you position and set up your subwoofers especially, and the rest of your speakers. The room correction should just be a little cherry on top to any slight imperfections in the linear frequency response. It can work those out, but that's about it. Shouldn't have to do a ton, and it sounds like it doesn't. So that's good.
Right.
That's exactly what we want.
So the only thing really to consider here is Atmos. So if you're interested in going to Atmos, or if you haven't already gone to Atmos and you want to go to Atmos, or you just want to have the ability to someday do Atmos, that would be a reason to upgrade your receiver. Now, as far as room correction, of course, I've said many times in this podcast, for me, XT32 was what I was looking for. I was not interested in a lower tier of Odyssey, and at the time, Yamaha's YPOW RSC was only available on their flagship, and it was stupid expensive.
Right.
So, yeah, that for me was where I drew the line for myself, because I wanted to have the best granularity within my room correction system that I could get. So would you notice a difference? My guess is sonically, probably not a lot.
Right. Yeah.
If at all, it would not be the kind of difference where you're like, I'm so glad I just spent an extra couple $100. But if you can tie that together with a couple of other reasons of the ones I just mentioned, then you're going to be looking at the 3000 series, right?
Well, that's just right along those lines, Andrew. I would tell you to enjoy what you have for pretty much the rest of the year, and coming towards the end of the year when the prices start to drop and things start to show up at Accessories for Less, that new X3600 from Denon that we mentioned in the news when Richard was here. That is great, because that has now brought 11 speaker processing down to the 3000 series for the first time in Denon's lineup, which means the $1,000 retail price unit now has that 11 speaker processing. You'd automatically be getting multi-Q XT32 at that point. And we know for a fact once it shows up at Accessories for Less, it's going to be like $700 or $800 right away. And then a little while later, we'll drop down to like $500, where, I mean, what the X3400 going back a couple of model years now is down to like $450 at this point. So considering what you'll be able to get, I mean, there's not a tremendous reason for you to upgrade right this second. And then when you're like, because I'm sure at some point he's going to be like, yep, 4 overhead speakers is what I want for Atmos. And at that point, you can get this for probably between $500 and $700. And then you'll have XT32 just because it's there anyway.
Right. And honestly, I don't know I can't predict what's going to happen in the future, especially with 8K and everything else. But I have a hard time believing that any major changes are going to come to the HDMI connection. That if you bought a receiver now, that it would not pass through what you needed to pass through for the next while.
Yeah.
Because I don't think we're going to get native 8K, or we're going to get higher bit rates than what it can currently do. So
yeah, unless it really is only 8K that needs, or I guess 4K at 120 hertz would be the other
thing, right?
Possible reason. But I mean, I guess maybe the new video game systems are the new Xbox and PS5 maybe will do. Are they actually going to do? They're not going to render 4K at 120.
I feel like they're going to do that.
No,
I don't see any reason for them to do that. Now, Sony might, because they sell TVs. So, but I don't see Microsoft doing it.
Well, I'm sure there'll be like a 4K 120 output on those systems, but it'll be like, they're actually rendering the thing maybe at best at 4K 60, and then they're just frame doubling it inside the system. So it's not really 100. It's not going to be like a high-end gaming PC that's actually rendering at 120. I don't believe that for a second. So, yeah. But I mean, that would be the other thing. You could even wait even longer, because if you're not champing at the bit for overhead speakers, then wait even longer, and there'll definitely be receivers with HDMI 2.1 and the full bandwidth at some point in the not too distant future, maybe 2 years from now. So,
if I were this guy, I wasn't looking for Atmos, then I would be going to like high end, or like I know Magnolia, whatever, but I could go to demo rooms and listen to speakers. That's what I would do, until I found something that I was like, oh, I would really like to have this. Yeah, it's like,
and given where you're starting with Paradigm monitor speaker, it's gonna be a ways up.
It's gonna be a ways up there for sure, and this gives you plenty of time to look for those deals on AudioGone or eBay or Craigslist or Open Box at one of these stores or something like that, or in trade with somebody.
So no rush, Andrew. No rush.
No rush. All right. Corey on Facebook. I didn't skip anybody, did I?
Nope.
Okay, Corey. Corey's using the Optima HD20 projector. He used to have it in a basement where he couldn't fully control the ambient light. So at the time, he got a 120-inch ambient light rejecting screen from Carl's place. I don't know who Carl is, but
just a gray screen. There's nothing fancy about it. It's just a gray screen.
All right. So he's moved his setup into his garage where he has no ambient light at all. Would switching over to a white screen improve his picture quality, or should he just continue to use his current screen? He's thinking to go with elite screens if he gets a new plain white screen. What are our thoughts? I think you should go with the other one. That's cheaper.
Oh, Silver Ticket.
Silver Ticket, yeah.
Yeah, just get Silver Ticket. Although I don't know, he didn't say anything about motorized, but if it were motorized, maybe that's why he's looking at elite screens. Because Silver Ticket doesn't really have motor. I mean, they list some motorized options, but they're never in stock and haven't been for a long time. So I don't think those really exist. If it's a fixed frame screen, then I'd go Silver Ticket. But, I mean, does he need to at all? I mean, is it that important? He's got a gray screen right now. I'm not a big fan of gray screens, but you've been watching it all this time. You're not going to, notice it without a side-by-side or a change. Yeah. But then given how cheap Silver Ticket screens are, then... Yeah.
This is a Father's Day gift, honestly, my dude. This, or your birthday gift or whatever. I was just talking to somebody the other day. I'm like, I am 40... How old? I'll be 48 this year. And my parents still give me $100 every year for my birthday.
Nice.
Every year, I give me $100. They've been doing it since I was like 10.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Or 12 or something like that.
Haven't adjusted for inflation.
Nope, no inflation adjustment, nothing whatsoever. But, I mean, and that's about how much a Silver Ticket is.
It's a little bit more than that, but 2 birthdays would cover it. That's for sure.
Yeah. So... it's not a huge expenditure, so I don't feel like you saying I just want a white screen now that I have whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that by the time you take the other one down and you put this one up, you're going to be like,
yeah.
But if you saw them side by side,
you
would be like, okay, yes, this one is superior to that one in this environment. If you had an ambient light, you say this is just a gray screen, right?
Yeah, that's what the Carlos Place ones are, because they're very inexpensive. I mean, they're great. They're great for DIY because they basically just sell the fabric, and I got no problem with it at all. But this isn't some super fancy, little bead reflective thingy, layers.
If it was light reflecting, where it was like the full on like hot spotting in a dark sort of thing, I'd be 100% on board with you getting a new screen. But as it is with just a gray screen, I have a feeling that without seeing them side by side, the difference is going to be sort of negligible.
Yeah.
So I would try to finagle a way that I wasn't really buying this for myself, or I was buying it with money I didn't really care about.
Also, the HD20 is definitely not like a black level monster. It's got fairly gray blacks, so the gray screen does actually help to lower those black levels a little tiny bit.
Yeah.
So I'm almost leaning in your case, Corey, of kind of sticking with what you got, because I don't see. I mean, even though me personally, if you were starting from square one, you didn't already own a screen, I'd be like, yeah just go get a white silver ticket screen for sure. Right. But since you already own one, and let's do this. Let
me say this. All right, this is what I say. You can buy a new screen when you buy a new projector.
Ah, there you go.
All right. So when you upgrade your projector, whenever that's going to be, at that point, you buy a new screen.
All right, I'm down with that.
Until then, I feel like with the combination of screen and your history with this thing, and what the screen material is, I feel like you kind of stick with what you got until you're ready to get a new projector. So we'll hear from you next week when you want to know what projector to buy.
Could be
5040 UB. How do you feel about 1250 from the clearance center? Not bad. Josimer, is that where we're going with?
I don't know how to pronounce his name. It might be Yosimar. Might be. I don't know.
I have never seen.
We're sorry. We apologize for mangling your name. I'm sure we are. We don't know how to pronounce your name.
Spanish name that looked like this in my life, and I lived in California.
I
for
do not
years,
know.
So.
Sorry.
Anyways,
hopefully
your name
can figure out that we're talking about you.
It can't possibly be Joe. It could be
Joe.
Josie.
Maybe just Joe.
Let's go with Joe. All right.
It's probably not Joe at all.
It's probably not Joe.
We're sorry.
Probably goes by Mar or something like that.
Could be.
Or Imar. Imar would be good too. Or Immer. I don't know. All right. Joe says he started with an entry-level Onkyo H home theater in the box, the S3 3900. Over time, he's replaced the included speakers and subwoofers with Polk speakers and subwoofers. The receiver that came with the Onkyo does not have a subwoofer pre-out. It has red and black push-button speaker wire connections to the subwoofer, just like the other 5 speakers. His Polk subwoofer has speaker wire inputs, so he's using those. Sound definitely comes out, but he thinks it sounds messy. Would it be worth it for him to upgrade his receiver to a Denon or Yamaha, or is he missing something by not having a subwoofer pre-out? I'll be honest with you. The number of times I've connected a subwoofer to speaker-level wires is approximately 0.
My very first RCA branded home theater in a box had that. So that's.
I think I've had one. So maybe once. I think I had a KLH, my KLH little subwoofer thing. I did do that as well, but I don't remember, how exactly these things work. The amp should take that analog signal and then convert it to whatever digital and then convert it back to analog as it's powering the subwoofer. But unless the subwoofer is expecting the amps within the receiver to power it, the connection type shouldn't make a difference.
Right. I mean, functionality-wise, there isn't a necessity to upgrade your receiver. You aren't missing something, the
messiness is not coming from the type of wire that's
right. Yeah, it's not.
Is what I'm saying.
It doesn't have to be a subwoofer pre-out for this to function correctly. I strongly believe that what's going on here, I read through the manual, is that it says the default crossover setting, and you can change the crossover setting, but the default in this one is set to 200 hertz. Which is
That's pretty high.
Abnormally high, but it's because the little speakers that came with the Onkyo home theater in a box cannot play probably below 250 hertz, to be honest, the ones that come in this home theater in a box package originally. So Onkyo had set the default crossover to 200 hertz, and I'm guessing you probably haven't changed that. And that could quite easily explain why you're able to easily localize the subwoofer if it's playing all the way up to 200 hertz. That could result in, I don't know exactly what's meant by messy, but it could just be that you don't have a very good blend, and that is entirely possible if you've left it at the default setting. Now, unfortunately...
But a messy subwoofer could be placement, it could be port noise,
it could be many other things.
It could be a lot of the stuff. Yeah. It could be too loud, too soft. I don't know.
But you'll be able to localize it with a 200 hertz crossover, so that could be part of the problem. Unfortunately, it says that when you adjust the crossover setting, it also adjusts automatically the low pass filter for the LFE channel, which normally is a separate setting in a lot of other AV receivers, and you would normally leave the low pass for the low frequency effects channel at 120 hertz, where the signal cuts off anyway, and then have the crossover to your speaker set at 80 hertz or whatever is
it's
necessary.
It's not going to be a ton of LFE
but
information
it's not huge. I mean, I might choose 100, right? I might choose 100 instead of 80 or something, so to split the difference a little bit. So give that a try, because that's easy to do. You just go into your settings there and set the crossover to, I'm going to suggest 100 hertz instead of the default 200. See if that does anything. Do a subwoofer crawl. Put the subwoofer in your seat, and then you go to all the places where the subwoofer could potentially live in your room, and you might discover that where you normally have it placed, you got a roller coaster of frequency response going on there, and that could be the messiness that you're talking about. But yeah, there's not a vital need to. If you did, though, upgrade to a Yamaha or Denon, then you would be getting room correction for the first time. You'd be getting, the automatically properly set bass bass management and that. So it's not like you would be getting nothing for your money, but functionally you don't have to.
Yeah, if the messiness is coming, the messiness in my mind, cannot be associated with the wire connection. That can't be the issue. I mean, I know it's not a traditional way that we talk about subwoofers being connected, but that doesn't mean that it's in any way inferior to other ways.
The signal will absolutely still get there.
Right. So I think that changing the crossover, subwoofer crawl, still have a problem, call us back. All right. Just Jay, who's not Joe and not Josimer, but just Jay. Jay would like to electrically isolate the TV and receiver in his bedroom from the rest of the gear in his equipment room 100 feet away. An electrical surge fried the HDMI board and receiver in his bedroom, but thankfully, that time, that was the only thing damaged. A second electrical surge fried a second receiver in his bedroom, but it also got all the way back to his equipment room, where it fried two more HDMI ports on two other devices. Jay heard us mentioning how a fiber optic HDMI cable would electrically isolate things, but that any fiber optic HDMI cable that says it supports ARC or audio return channel still has a copper wire in it. So is there a purely fiber optic HDMI cable with no ARC support that he could use? Why isn't everything on a surge protector? Let's start with that.
Well, it might be. Surge protectors don't necessarily, if it's a lightning strike he's talking about, it doesn't necessarily always completely protect you. We also don't know for sure that the way the surge is going is actually from the bedroom going down. I mean, strange things can happen where it comes in through
electricity. It's like completely unpredictable.
Yeah, it comes in through your cable TV, goes through your cable box, through the first AV receiver, all the way to the second receiver, and nothing fries until the second receiver for some reason. Right. I mean, things can happen that way, but nonetheless, just answering the question as it is. Now, what's funny is I had to think back years ago. It was close to when I was starting this podcast, when fiber optic HDMI cables were really rare. Monoprice wasn't selling them yet. No affordable ones were available. And it was literally like you would get a spool of fiber wire, and then you'd have these little
self-terminate.
Yeah, I mean, they weren't even HDMI connectors. You had to adapt them to HDMI, and then they had each end had its own separate power plug because you needed it for, the diodes at either end to function in that. So back then, the fiber in the middle was truly only fiber. But today, I went searching for fiber optic HDMI cables that don't have any copper in them, and I couldn't find any myself, because any of the ones that are being sold, they are powered, but they typically just draw the power from one end, either the sync device or the sending device, and then there is a small piece of copper to send power to the other end, because you still have to power the diodes at both ends of these things.
Right.
And they're using, I couldn't find a single one that didn't have some copper in it. Even if it didn't support ARC, it still had a little bit of copper in it just to power both ends. So
I don't know, man. I mean, you would think that cable would fry before it would send a surge all the way through. I mean, because this is a little copper wire.
It's very skinny, but it doesn't take much. It doesn't take much. Yeah. Honestly, what I think might make more sense here, if we don't even know that the issue is that something is traveling through the 100-foot HDMI connection. We aren't even certain of that at this point. But supposing that it is, or if you just want to cover all bases, what I might actually recommend to you at this point is to transition over to HD base T, which of course is Ethernet, which is copper. But you insert in the signal path an Ethernet surge suppressor, an Ethernet lightning suppressor, which are inexpensive. You can get a good one. That's 1 gigabit per second bandwidth and a proper lightning arrestor with its own separate grounding wire for about $25. So we're not talking a huge investment, although, of course, transitioning over to HD-based T.
HD-based T is not going to be cheap.
But if he was going to get a 100-foot optical fiber HDMI cable anyway, it's not more expensive than that these days to go HD-based T.
So what, HD-based T, the converter boxes are like, what, $100, $200?
I mean, you can get the full package for about $250.
Yeah.
So,
and
$275, it'll be Ethernet connection. You put a lightning Ethernet arrestor in between. I think that's actually potentially the best way to come at it these days.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I would also suggest that if you're continuing to get these surges, then, a whole house surge protector, surge thing on your electrical box is something you could look into, and making sure that every single wire that comes into any of your home theater equipment is protected.
Yeah.
Via APC or, SurgeX or something like that. If you're having these kind of problems, SurgeX is, and you really want to arrest them, I would consider SurgeX.
Yeah.
All right. Infinite Gary. All right. According to Odyssey Labs, the point of calibrating speaker trim levels is to 1, achieve the same level for every speaker, and 2, play at film reference when the master volume is at 0. Gary heard an installer say that Odyssey assigns the amount of power being sent to each speaker to maximize the potential of the speakers within the room. Is what the installer said a misstatement, or was he essentially saying the same thing as Odyssey Labs? I mean, installers say all kinds of crap that ain't true.
I mean, the words as quoted by Gary do not mean the exact same thing. I mean, right. I don't know what was in this supposed installer's head, so I don't know what he was intending to say, but
maximize the potential of the speakers within the room sounds like he's talking about the room correction and not the volume.
Sure, and that's a highly generic statement, which, if we're being super generous, could mean, yes, we're calibrating it to reference volume, because that's all speaker trim levels are there for, is to calibrate to reference volume. That's all it is. But I mean, maybe to just explain for everyone listening, the speaker trim levels are there because different speakers have different efficiencies, different sensitivities. Right. So the same amount of power being sent to two very different speakers in terms of their efficiency will produce different decibel levels. It's the same amount of power, same signal level being sent, but one speaker is much more efficient than the other, so it plays louder than the other. So the trim levels are there so that you can equalize all of that, so that if there's a signal saying play out of the front left speaker and your surround right speaker and reach the listener in the primary listening seat at the same volume, then it should be the same volume. But if you're using two different speakers, you might have to adjust the trim level so that what reaches you is actually
same speakers in two different places or two different distances or whatever. Yeah.
And absolutely, the second part, Odyssey has it bang on. When you have the master volume set at 0, that should equal the film reference volume. So I don't know what the installer was saying. Maybe that's along the lines of what he meant if we're being very generous in our interpretation, but that is not the words that he said. So.
Why does Gary have custom installers over in the first place?
He has people over all the time. Calibrators, installers. He likes to keep on talking.
I can see that. Brandon, when Richard and Rob finally got to the news in episode, finally, how long did guys take?
We went through all the home automation stuff. We got to the news about an hour and a half in.
6:53. Anyways, episode 653. Rob got excitedly talking about how the newest Denon Marantz receivers finally let you play surround sound play a surround sound source in surround sound in the main room while playing that same source down mixed to stereo out of zone 2. So does HEO support this now too? Is it like Yamaha Music Cast now, where you can be playing full immersive audio in the main room while sharing the same source throughout the rest of the house wirelessly? I'm going to say no.
There is no mention of that. It specifically only talks about the built-in Zone 2 functionality of the receiver itself. There's no mention of this being part of HEOS. And furthermore, it only mentions surround sound, not immersive audio, in the main room, and then Zone 2. But that might just be because they were talking about using the binding posts that can be reassigned to Zone 2, in which case If it's
you wouldn't have Atmos
a 7 or 9 channel receiver, then you've run out of things to do Atmos with anyway. So I think that's more likely what they're talking about. But no, they were only talking about, I mean, might be wrong, and hopefully this does come to HEOS, but there was no mention of HEOS supporting this, just the built-in Zone 2.
So a second question is sort of moot, but will previous models be getting this feature via firmware update?
No.
I mean, I
No,
I honestly, there's some things that have flabbergasted me about receivers and AV gear in general. That one thing that always kind of baffled me, and baffled everybody who's ever written to this podcast about it, is like, how come I have to plug in, my sources analog to get them out of my
to get them out of Zone 2? Yes,
that used to be the case all the time. It
still is the case with some current models.
Yeah, and I'm like, I have no clue. It cannot possibly be that expensive to get a DAC for these channels. It just can't. I mean, it just can't be that expensive because DACs are in everything. Mm-hmm. They're everywhere. I'm tripping over DACs around my house.
And in this case, to do this, you'd have to have some kind of secondary processing to either an entire second decoder so that both zones are literally decoding the signal, or at the minimum, one of the main zone is certainly decoding it into PCM. Maybe the second zone just takes the PCM but has a down mixer, right? But either way, there's secondary processing going on to down mix for the Zone 2,
which is more expensive for sure than
a little bit,
but we were talking about.
With the processors these days, it should be pretty easy.
My point here is that how is it that Yamaha has had this for however long they've had it, which has been years, and Denon's still like, nah, we're good.
Because they don't make large changes to the processing of the units every year. I guess so. But regardless, I'm happy that it's here in some form, because it was silly to have to send stereo out of any source to begin with just to get it to play out of Zone 2. So at least you don't have to do that anymore. So little by little, we're getting there. But no, it won't be coming via a firmware upgrade.
All right, Joel. Joel has Paradigm speakers from the version 4 monitor series, a pair of mini monitor V4s up front, along with the CC370 V4 center and a pair of ADP 170 surrounds. ADPs are not Paradigms, though, right?
They are. Yeah, no, that's the adaptive dipole of Paradigm.
Okay.
Yes.
Anyways, he loves them. But one of his mini monitor front speakers has something not quite right with his tweeter. It still works, but somehow it's now quieter, about 3 dB down at 5 kilohertz, and rolls off to being about 10 dB down at 20 kilohertz, according to his measurements, and comparing them to the other mini monitor speakers. So he's using a Denon X 1300 with the Odyssey Multi-Q. It's doing its best to compensate. Measurements show it's effectively boosting that upper treble and giving. This is only happening at the high frequencies. Things still sound pretty much fine. Mm-hmm. But back when he was shopping for speakers, he heard the higher end Paradigm reference studio speakers. He would have loved to have bought them at the time, but they were too expensive. So he wound up with the monitor series. You should talk to the dude who got the other Paradigms for just about basically free. He said they were free. He's just got them. He's just got them everywhere. Anyways, in Paradigm's current lineup, he's been considering getting some Premier Series speakers since he's bothered by this one tweeter acting up, but then he came across a deal. Used but well cared for Paradigm reference Studio V4 Model 40 front speakers with their stands, the 570 center, and a pair of Millennia ADP surrounds thrown in, all for $700 total.
Whew. That is cheap for reference studios.
That's real inexpensive. For those of you who think that $700 is a lot of money, it is.
It is,
but it's not. I mean, if you said for the reference studio front speakers for $700, that would still be a deal.
Right. For 5 speakers, that's a deal. Yeah.
So these are physically quite a bit larger than his current speakers, but he knows for certain they will physically fit, and he wouldn't mind being able to play louder anyway, since he thinks his current monitor speakers might be straining sometimes. He knows he likes how they sound, but in Paradigm's current lineup, they are heavily marketing their perforated phase alignment lens for their tweeters and mid-range drivers. They've patented and implemented all the way up to from their flagship Persona series down to their Premier series that he's been considering. Are the new designs so much better that he should pass up on this deal? What do we think about Paradigm's new design versus the older ones? What should he do? I would totally snatch this deal. I would not have emailed us. I would have already owned these speakers.
He might just be confirming at this point, but no, I would absolutely snap up that deal, because I mean, okay, if you get Reference Studio Paradigm speakers, which granted they don't make anymore. It's an older model. Right. But if you got Reference Studio, so there was one series just higher than the Reference Studio, right? There was the Reference Signature. That was the one with the beryllium drivers and all the rest of it. But the Reference Studio was just one tier below that. Now, if you are a person in anything resembling anything close to a normal-sized room in a house, and you get Paradigm Reference Studio speakers and you're disappointed in them, something else is wrong.
This is not the speakers' fault.
It is not the speakers. So, I mean, yeah, get the deal. Done. Now,
that's done.
Let's look at the other side of this. They've got this new design.
Yeah. And honestly, Paradigm, along with a lot of the Canadian companies, they all sort of test out of the same lab because they have access to this, this state-of-the-art lab that everybody wants to use, the NRC lab, which is just amazing. I mean, but they are still going to be going for a Paradigm sound. Come hell or high water, they're going for a Paradigm sound. And that sound is neutral. They're very flat. They're
very wide, even dispersion.
Right. You might call them flat to a fault. Some people hear these things and say they're bright because they're flat way up high.
And I've definitely heard some people describe it as analytical.
Yeah. Like, that's a bad thing.
I know. This thing just says exactly what the signal's fed to play. Where's my warmth?
Where's my warmth? Where's its personality? I don't want its personality. I'm buying a speaker so I can hear the personality of the thing that's coming out of it.
Yes.
So, yes. I mean, regardless of what they're doing with their new tweeter, and it very well may be superior, very well may be have better extension.
You'll recall that going back to like the Reference Studio monitors, Paradigm was one of the companies that always recommended actually using them with the grill on because they put some things in the grill that they intended to be part of the dispersion pattern. And now all they're doing is building that right into the thing that's directly on top of the tweeter. So now you don't have to use the grill, or the grill is essentially just completely transparent now. And now they have this little phase aligning lens that they're calling it over the drivers and over the tweeter. So honestly, this is my true opinion of Paradigm today, which is that they are still excellent speakers. But I've noticed that they seem to be focusing, and I don't blame them at all for this, but focusing a bit more on selecting a given price point and then offering a speaker within that price point, as opposed to, in the old days, it really seemed like they were just trying to, I mean, they obviously had some kind of price cap in mind, because otherwise every speaker would just cost the maximum, but it was more like they really just engineered the best they could for whatever, and then sold it at like the least they could and still be profitable. And now, like, they never used to have speakers that cost $20,000 a pair, and now they do. That's in the Persona series, the flagship, and it seems like they're kind of, I mean, and again, business-wise, this makes sense to me, so I don't blame them at all. But it's more like, here's the price bracket. We need an offering in that, and let's make one. It just feels, I don't know if that's, but that's the way it feels to me, because they never used to have the same sort of price brackets that they do now.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I mean, my personal experience with Paradigm has been, and understand the last time I really heard a Paradigm speaker was a long time ago. In my experience with them was that, this was an excellent speaker, and one of the very few speakers that you could get out of a, higher end shop that was of the type of design I wanted, which was that flat frequency response, that sound that was getting out of the way and just giving me what I wanted. But it was also indicative of other manufacturers like Axiom at the time, which were considerably cheaper than Paradigms were. Now, that ain't the case anymore.
Like before all the internet direct speaker companies came around, Paradigm was frequently the value choice, because it was like you were getting a performance level at a price point that almost nobody else was offering. But once all the internet direct brands came in, they started being able to undercut Paradigm with similar levels of performance. Paradigm has remained, for the most part, sold through dealers, and they have those relationships that they've had for decades, and they're not going to give up on those, and nor should they. And they're saying, well, we're not necessarily going to be able to compete just on the lowest price anymore, so we're going to start having more visually beautiful designs. We're going to start going up market a little bit so that the profitability remains there, even though our sales numbers might go down. We're making more per unit. That all of these things make business sense. I don't blame them one bit, but it just feels to me like that's the direction they've been forced to move.
Unfortunately, at least on this podcast, we haven't had the opportunity to recommend Paradigm as much as I
Hmm.
would like. I would like to recommend them more, but unfortunately, most of the time, I can find a comparable speaker for
Internet
less money
direct,
that's
right?
internet
Yeah,
direct.
exactly.
You know,
Yeah.
and that means I haven't been able to talk about them as much as I would like. Now, you've finally given me, not finally, but we've talked about them twice now on this podcast, but this is a perfect example of like, wow, I'm so glad that we can finally say something really nice about Paradigm because I want to, and we can, because you found a great deal. And if you haven't jumped on it, you need to jump on it immediately. And I wouldn't worry one iota about that perforated grill
No,
crap.
there's not going to be anything in there so earth-shattering that it's going to make the monitor, the reference studio speakers that you already heard and know that you love suddenly sound less than. No.
Yeah. All right, Justin, not Bieber on Facebook. So we brought up IKEA's new Symphonisk Sonos speakers. What do we think about their new? Man, I just. Okay, so let me just say to IKEA and Emotiva. All right, I hate you both. Okay, Emotiva, stop using X's in front of everything and eyes and stuff. And IKEA, okay, Emotiva, start naming stuff. IKEA, stop naming things.
They name it Swedish words. It's not our fault we don't know how to pronounce them.
Oddlog. The new Oddlog sound absorption panels. They're 1/2 inch thick, 7-inch diameter polyester fiber circles with tabs and slots that let you connect them together. They come in packs of 15 for $30, which is enough to cover roughly a 20 by 40-inch area. They're light gray on one side, dark gray on the other, so you can create your own patterns. If you like, IKEA recommends using at least 4 packs in a room in combination with rugs, drapes, and soft furnishings. They also recommend hanging these Oddlog circles 4 inches away from walls so they have an air gap between them. Thoughts? They're polyester fiber, right? So that's
That's fine.
fine. I mean, there's nothing I don't like about them.
Except that they're only a 1/2 inch thick. That's the only thing I'm not a fan
But
of.
you know what? Who cares?
Higher fee. This is for tamping down some slap echo, maybe.
Yeah. And in a lot of rooms, that's pretty much all you need.
Mm-hmm.
This is not what I would recommend for home theater.
Right. And
But
this
it is what I
not
would
going to do
recommend for
anything in your
a great
base.
room. Yeah. I would recommend this for a great room. I would recommend this for just any room where you have people talking.
Yeah, well, actually, like the place where a couple of my aunts have moved now to a retirement community, they've got, it's a really nice place, but all the rooms are completely concrete, which is great for soundproofing from unit to unit, but they're completely concrete, hard surfaces, pretty high ceilings, and you go in there and it just plain echoes in the rooms, even furnished. It just plain echoes. Something like this, very affordable. I don't know. I mean, the looks are going to be either you like them or you don't. That's the way IKEA often is. But if you happen to like the looks, this is a very inexpensive way that you could reduce some slap echo. I'm quite certain of that. So I don't have a beef with them. These aren't going to be replacing 4 and 6 inch thick proper insulation panels. That's absolutely not what they're for. But it's a thing that, might help some people with some dialogue and slap echo issues.
All right, Rob G, not Rob U. So Rob, just by happenstance, even though he started with the home theater box and has had has upgraded several times since then, Rob has only ever owned downward firing ported subs. He wasn't ever looking for that design specifically. It's just the way that things panned out. He's noticed that most subwoofers appear to be front firing. So what are the pros and cons of down firing versus front firing subwoofers? I mean, oh, bless you or whatever that was. I don't think that there's any real differences as far as performance wise. There's not a lot to be considered on that level. It's a design choice by the designer. Sometimes, I've had down firing. I have 2 down firing in here right now with upward firing ports. I've had down firing with side firing passive radiators. I've had front firing with front slot ports. I have everything but upward firing, which I don't think anybody ever made something that stupid. But there's no real reason that one sounds different. They're omnidirectional, so it's all about the directionality of that sound. I mean, that it's all about the how they want to build their box. Basically, I don't think that there's much difference other than that. Uh, let's put it this way: if you were to trade in your down firing and buy two front firing subwoofers that had the same frequency response, say you went with just pretend that you had SVS, PC 2000s,
Sure.
you got PB 2000s, and put them in the same room, you'd go sound the same. That would be it.
Yes, yeah. Performance-wise, sound-wise, I don't think I can point to any pros and cons. But just on a sheer mechanical basis, if it's downward firing, that means one of the heaviest things in the sub is now lower center of gravity.
Yeah.
The down firing one, like in a PC 2000 versus a PB 4000, well, now that driver is right at the bottom of that cylinder. That's put the center of gravity lower, and it's slightly more stable that way. Also, the driver is moving up and down as opposed to front to back, side to side. So in terms of how much is it shaking the enclosure, well, it's not shaking it, back and forth. It's shaking it up and down, which might be a little bit more stable. So mechanically, I can say downfiring actually has a little bit of a pro in that sense, in that it's just probably got a lower center of gravity and probably doesn't shake itself side to side the way a front firing subwoofer would. But acoustically, sound-wise, it makes no difference.
Yeah. I mean, it's just... I think a lot of these things have to, they come up with a design that they're comfortable with. They think looks cool, and that's it. I mean,
a lot of it is marketing.
Subwoofers. Yeah, subwoofers is about the size of the driver, the size of the amp, and the volume of air inside the box. I mean, that's literally all it is. Subwoofers, and God help me for saying it, are quite easily the easiest speaker to design. As things go,
and yet
which is
not
why
easy
you have
to execute all the time. So.
That's true, but that's why you see so many people that are building speaker boxes for, subwoofer boxes for their cars. You don't see them, dialing in speakers for their home theater. Sometimes they try, and it usually ends up horribly. But it's not as nearly as complex of having multiple drivers in the same box to worry about
you're not worrying about crossovers,
interactions. Crossovers, all that other stuff. There's a whole bunch of other things to consider. This is one driver, one box, one volume of air. How much bracing do you want to put in it, and you're done. And the driver doesn't care, and the sound doesn't care if it's coming out the bottom or the sides or the back or the front.
Not at low frequencies, not at all. Those are long bass waves that have wrapped around the subwoofer enclosure no matter what.
Yeah. John says he loves his home theater. It's dialed in, and he thinks it sounds spectacular. He only really cares about his primary seat and his pair of SVS PB 3000 subs, which he apparently sits on, vibrate his chest. So naturally, he wants an upgrade.
Not the way.
Not the subs, I hope. He's using a Yamaha RX-A 3070 to power a pair of Emotiva T2 towers and C2 center up front. He's mounted a pair of SVS Prime elevation speakers on his back wall as his surrounds, and sitting on atop his front towers. And wall-mounted surrounds are 4 NHT Atmos modules firing up in the ceiling. So it's a 5.2.4 configuration with an 85-inch Sony X900F for the display. The room is roughly 21.5 front to back, 27 wide, and 8 feet tall. The theater area takes up the right side of the room, where the dining area on the left is open on the left to a hallway, and the left rear opens up to the kitchen. There's carpet, curtains, and soft couches, but it's wood paneling for the walls with lots of pictures, figurines, and ornaments, and a flat ceiling with a couple of overhead fans. Despite the open layout, he is not looking for any sort of bass or subwoofer upgrade. Good, because he's got PC 2000. I mean,
3000s. Yeah.
3000s. He's got one PC 3000 basically in the middle of the front.
Oh, sorry,
wall
that should be PB. Sorry about that.
Okay,
that should be PB. They're both boxes. They are both boxes.
Anyway. PB 3000 basically in the middle of the front wall as a whole, so it in between the theater area and the dining area. And the second PB 3000 is on his right wall, close to the back corner. He's dialed in a 120 hertz crossover for all 9 of his speakers and isn't looking to do anything more in terms of bass. All right, so it is wood paneling everywhere, and there's some curtains over the windows and stuff. They look like they're pretty heavy curtains, but they're still curtains. Carpeting on the floor, flat ceiling, not leather reclining couches, like 2-seaters each or so.
One front facing and one sideways facing on the left-hand side. Yep.
So, would he hear or see any improvement if he purchased audiophile grade power cables to replace the stock power cords on all of his devices?
All together now.
No.
No, my goodness. The way I always like to put this is, so the power came from your power company through miles and miles of the power company's cable, copper wires, went through
huge
substations, multiple transformers.
That basically took that amount of power, which in order to send it over a long distance, you need to have a huge wire, a huge amount of power to get it to the substation, which then steps it down, because if they sent that directly to your house, everything in it would blow up.
So all of that going on, and then it went through probably dozens, sometimes even hundreds of feet of regular 12 or probably 14 gauge Romex, almost certainly 14 gauge Romex inside of your walls. So then, of course, it's the last 6 feet from the wall outlet to the piece of gear that makes all the difference. That makes no sense. It is when you want to talk about snake oil and ridiculous hokum in AV, aftermarket power cords has to be maybe the top candidate for the
I think the worst I ever saw was a surge protector. It wasn't even a surge protector. It was a power strip that was covered in it was quite literally, from what I could tell, a regular off the shelf, Walmart brand power strip that they had put a copper case around. And you could still see the plastic plugs coming up.
I mean, I guess the literal little rocks or beads or pieces of wood that
the tiny little clock and stuff like that,
literally do nothing, and sometimes people sit them atop their gear or their speakers and claim it makes a difference. I guess that's the worst possible snake oil.
If you really want to see those, you go to any Totem speaker manufacturer or speaker display. They always have these little cones all over the place, little metal cones everywhere. I'm like, what the?
But outside of that, aftermarket power cables might be the worst.
Yeah. So he says he's got surge protection, but would plugging all of his gear into a power conditioner provide any noticeable audio or video improvements? No.
Are you hearing static or seeing static lines on your TV at the moment?
If you're dialed in and you like the way it sounds, then there will be no improvement. If you've got surge protection, that's what you need.
Yes.
But the power conditioning is to, if there's some sort of problem with your power as it comes into the house. Now, a lot of us end up with power conditioning because it's part of the surge protector that we bought. APC has a lot, has battery backup stuff that we want for the battery backup. And along with that battery backup comes, power conditioning, which basically makes sure, denoises anything that might be in there, and then make sure that you're getting 120 at all times.
Sure.
So that's what it does. Really, we want the battery backup and the surge protection. The power conditioning comes along with it, because they might as well shove it in there since. Yeah,
try to find an APC that doesn't have RFI, EMI, filtering. But
filter.
No, this isn't the way to further improve your system. No.
Would he hear? This is C. I'm starting to think that we're getting trolled by the way this one, but let's go on.
I don't think so.
Would he hear an improvement if he switched to a separate pre-pro and amp? He sits 11 feet from his front speakers, which are 4 feet off of his front wall. The back of his couch is 6 feet from the back wall. No. No. I mean, those Emotiva,
those Emotivas are low impedance, fairly difficult to drive, but you're only 11 feet away. And you're not noticing any issues at the moment, and you've got an entirely capable AV receiver. So I mean, what we're only focusing here, though, when we're talking about this, on the amplifier side of it, saying basically, do you need a separate amplifier? And the answer in your setup is no, you don't need a separate amplifier. But sometimes, well, actually, this is the next question, so we'll talk about that, because sometimes people are thinking pre-pros might have an advantage over receivers for a completely different reason.
So what about the not too distant future when HDMI 2.1 takes over and potentially new codecs are added? Would it possibly make sense to go separates then, a new receiver plus an external amp, or just stick with the receiver and nothing else? There's if you're not having a problem with your receiver right now, there's no receiver in the future that I can imagine that you might buy that would have a problem with your speakers in the future.
Right.
It would be I just can't fathom it. I mean, you'd have to go like
Yeah, well
entry
down in the
level,
well down in the lineup for some weird reason. Yeah,
which you're not going to do.
No, I don't think.
Clearly,
I don't think you're the type of person. If anything, if you're
if you're
where is he
looking
right
at
now?
power chords,
Did he mention?
You're definitely not going to buy a cheap receiver.
Did he mention
Those
what
power
model
cords are like
he's using?
$300 for 3 feet. Are you kidding me?
Okay, he's already got the flagship Yamaha 3070, so he's probably going to stick with a flagship Yamaha or Denon Marantz or something like that if he were to upgrade in the future. Yeah, I mean, again, last week we were talking about the legitimate reasons why you might use a separate power amplifier. I mean, you can just work out the math and figure things out that way. Right. If you're keeping the same setup with these same speakers with the same distance, then the answer is no, you're not going to... I mean, buying a new AV receiver at some point for new features like HDMI 2.1 that you just can't get any other way than buying a new unit, yeah, that might happen one day. Sure. But that's not a reason why you're suddenly going to need separate amplification. And pre-pros, the pre-pros that have the same features as their like sister model receivers cost more, even though they don't have amplifiers in it, because they make so many fewer of them. It's just economy of scale. So nope, you're going to be getting a new AV receiver at some point in the future, unless you drastically change your room.
If you really want to buy an amp and connect it to your current receiver, and then say, "Wow, I just spent a bunch of money on the amp, and I can't tell any difference whatsoever," and that'll be fine. Yep. But it quite literally shouldn't make a difference. It might. I mean, maybe you are having some distortion. You're just not noticing it because you're too busy being shaken by
the other thing is, very often people are like, I've done all this. I'm still super into home theater. I don't want to stop just because I've reached a level that it seems like there's not much farther to go. And that's when I start questioning, what is the limiting factor of your system? And in your case, it's your room. Your room is now the limiting factor. You have very good speakers. You have an excellent AV receiver. You set things up in a manner where you're not over, driving anything. You're not asking it to do stuff that it can't do. Yeah. So now the limiting factor is your room. Now, how much change can you make to this room? It doesn't look like a ton. This looks like a very lived-in room that I'm not expecting you're going to be making massive changes to. But that's your limiting factor. Now, it's certainly not your power cable.
No. So, I mean, at that point, you start asking yourself, okay, is there another room in my house I can use instead of this room for my home theater? Is there some concessions I can make with my significant other so that I can add some more room treatments around here, or move that subwoofer that's in the back right corner on the other side of that bookshelf so it's in line with that other subwoofer, so you get a slight, some better response across those seats. I know you only care about your one seat, but you may not be recognizing uneven bass across that seat that you are sitting in without having done this. So there's other things to be done here. And honestly, at this point, it's, get a good Ultra HD Blu-ray player and start collecting movies and enjoying yourself. I mean, this is the time when you enjoy yourself. Nick would like our take on the recently...
that should be reborn, not reboard. Sorry, typo.
It's like, what the heck word is that? On the recently reborn KLH audio speaker lineup. The brand was purchased by David Kelly in 2017. Kelly previously served as president for Klipsch and oversaw that company's growth into a global brand. In particular, Mark Henninger over at AVS Forum gave the largest tower model, the KLH Kendall, a glowing review. With this largest tower priced at $1,300, KLH is entering a very competitive price bracket. They tout higher than normal efficiency, 96 dB for the Kindle, 91 for the MTM Story Center, and real wood veneers with internally braced and chambered MDF cabinets. Do we think these are a new high-value competitor worth considering? I remember him sending this question in, and I didn't look at it.
Now, I hope you have a look at them, because now... This is purely just going on the looks, and these are Kevlar drivers and aluminum dome tweeters. That's the type of materials that they're using here.
Oh, these look awfully familiar.
Do these not resemble very strongly SVS's speakers, the Prime series speakers? Wow, do these look similar? Now, I have no idea if there's any type of OEM relationship or anything, but this could very well just be a matter of the drivers, or particularly the tweeters, because these are definitely different woofers between the KLH and SVS, because SVS is polypropylene drivers and the KLH are Kevlar. But that tweeter and these designs, they look shockingly similar. And the KLH has actually cost a bit more than the SVS Prime series. So... Yeah. With that little bit of speculation said, I haven't heard these KLHs. I have no reason to expect that they couldn't have made an excellent sounding speaker at this price point because many other brands have. So
Right.
I've no reason to doubt that. Now, I will notice, I've been reading quite a few of Mark Henninger's speaker reviews, and I believe that man is a bass head. Because he also gave a very glowing review to the JBL Stage series speakers, and when I heard those ones in person, I'm like, yeah, that's some bass heavy speakers. And he gave a glowing review to these, and I'm like, I would not be shocked if these KLHs are a bass heavy speaker. But I mean, just more evidence. KLH has a model in there that they call their elevation speaker. And man, that looks familiar to a prime elevation speaker.
All right, wait a second here. I gotta see that.
Go to the
Hold
surround
on.
section.
I'm
the surround
clicked on
speakers.
it. It's I'm waiting for it to open.
This-
It's just I'm looking at the prime speakers at the same time.
Right.
The prime speakers are oh my god.
Tom has now seen the KLH
They
elevation speaker.
They look a little bit similar.
That's reminiscent of something we've seen before. Yeah. So I don't know if there's any relationship there, but instantly they seem recognizable. So I mean, I guess what would be claiming to be the most different is that efficiency spec. That efficiency spec is significantly higher in these KLHs versus, say, SVS Prime's efficiency spec, although not in the smaller speakers. In the smaller speakers, they're very, very similar, only in that tower. And they mention, talking about the crossover and the deeper bass extension, I'm like, well, one way to actually make a speaker more efficient is to reduce the number of elements in the crossover.
Yeah.
Because there is simply less filtering going on, which means less power loss, which means higher efficiency. And sometimes deeper bass extension because you simply aren't filtering off the lowest bass. You're just letting it play through. I have some suspicions about that type of thing. Also, there were a couple of other reviews, and none of them particularly commented on these being shockingly more efficient. So I don't know if that spec is...
I mean, these
really
look
that
very
efficient.
similar to the elevation speakers, but they are. It looks like wider and shallower.
Wider and shallower,
than-
yeah.
Yeah, than the elevation speakers, and I think they're also meant to be, or they can be placed on top of their tower.
Oh, definitely,
speakers.
yeah, used as Atmos speakers, but there doesn't seem to be anything particularly.
Just so
different to
everybody
make them
understands
Atmos.
this, OEMing is something that happens all the time in this business. There is absolutely nothing wrong with it. Emotiva does it all the time. Some of the amplifiers that you would be shocked to know which ones they've made in the past. Right. And they have relationships with these companies, and I'm not even sure if we're supposed to talk about it, but that's totally normal. So could this be an OEM speaker? It could be. Do I think they're a price point leader? I don't know. I'd have to hear them at are they $1,300 a pair?
$1,300 a pair for I mean, that's for the flagship. There's
right, so,
$650 each.
Yeah, $650 each. So the towers at SVS for the Prime towers are $500 each.
That's
so it's $150 more than that. Which whatever could be.
And these ones are being sold like the easiest place to find the KLHs right now is at Crutchfield.
Right, which is easy to find. So, I wouldn't mind hearing them.
Sure,
I'll put it to you that way.
I also wouldn't be shocked one little bit if I put them side by side with some FCS Prime towers and said, "Wow, those sound similar." That would not shock me in the least.
I mean, it's just like when was it Bryson started making their own speakers, and I'm like,
that's an Axiom,
exactly like an Axiom speaker, like down to the 25-cent tweeter.
Yep.
So, all right. Mike took advantage of Geek's free room advice service. They sent him a list of suggestions and created a shopping cart with their recommended products for his room. It's well above his budget at the moment, so we'd like to get our take on their suggestions overall and then do more DIY. This is a 13.5 by 21-foot long room that Mike built himself with the soffit grid on the ceiling to contain all of his lighting and wiring. His gear is in a separate room, but he put a nook on the right side wall where he can keep his gaming system. And he plans to build more nooks so he can recess his side surround speakers, which are Focal Super Birds that stick out a little bit over 6 inches at the moment. He has a slap echo and some uneven frequency response that he wants to address with room treatments. And while he put insulation in his seating riser isn't vented, so isn't acting as any sort of bass trap at the moment. He drilled some holes. call it good. All right. It's a good looking room. It's gray with a tan carpet. It looks like a really dark gray, maybe black.
Yep, we've looked at Mike's
ceiling is
room
also very, very
a couple
dark.
of times before. Actually, followed it all the way from its construction, and he was the one who was having that issue with like trying to get the Odyssey mic all the way from the equipment room through and extension things and HDMI cables that he had to.
What are those white things on the wall? I can't figure out what those are.
White things on the wall. I mean, there's light sconces. Is that what you're...
Is that what? No, are those sconces? Well, he's got lights all over the ceiling. What does he need sconces for? Those white things are sconces.
Yep, looks, I guess. Those sconces stick out just as much as the side speakers, so I'm not sure why those side speakers have to be recessed, but he's dead set on it, so fine.
All right. Well. So Gick suggestions are use Guilford made fabric since it's completely matte. Their cheaper stock fabric has a bit of sheen, more like an eggshell paint finish. I mean, Guilford of Maine is a lot more expensive than your regular stuff, and it is probably superior. But what is he using this on? On the room treatments themselves?
The room treatments all over the place, and he's thinking of maybe going DIY to bring the price down, but then he'd be, just purchasing Guilford of Maine fabric. So it doesn't have to be Guilford of Maine. You can go to your local fabric store and get less expensive acoustically transparent fabric that doesn't have a sheen to it. So that's an option to bring the price down a little bit.
So grid fuser diffusion panels in the bays of his ceilings to address the slap echo. Okay. And create the most diffuse overhead effect for Atmos. All right. So I don't understand any of what was just said.
Right. So he's got this grid pattern of soffits that he made up there.
I don't understand why they're recommending it. But
well, I mean, we in the past said that he might consider putting panels in those bays up in his ceiling because they'd blend right in. You wouldn't notice them visually at all. And that's a place that you could quite easily put more, acoustic treatment. And simply Gick is saying to put diffusion up there rather than absorption. And in general, I'm a fan of diffusion on the ceiling. That's what I did on my own ceiling. I put diffusion up there instead of absorption.
I've had people have hit or miss reactions to diffusion on the ceiling. If I were putting anything on the ceiling, and they said diffusion, I'd get the ones that do both.
Right, the ones that have a scatter plate on top of some absorption. Sure.
Yes, that's what I would put up there. That's probably even more expensive than what they said.
Well, I mean, the DIY way you could do this actually would be to just put some loose insulation. And it doesn't have to be a super thick layer. If we're talking about a slap echo, then just regular 2-inch thick insulation. You just put a little layer of that in the bays, and then you could put some diffusion on top of that. And that would be a DIY way to do it instead of buying, whole-made wrapped panels that cost more. Just loose insulation, maybe a little fabric over it if something's going to be, visually peeking through the diffusion on top of it. But you could go that way. And that way you'd have both.
So tri-traps floor to ceiling in the front corners with the optional membrane for maximum low frequency effectiveness. Monster bass traps also with the optional membrane sideways below the screen. So that membrane is that a diffusion thing, or is that a resonator thing?
Yeah, that's so it's not quite a tuned membrane bass trap, but they add it on there, and it is like semi-tuned so that it affects even lower frequencies than just a panel without the membrane on it would.
So instead of doing what they suggested, you could just buy insulation, stack it up in your corner, and do a chunk trap.
Yeah.
Which you can look that up online. It's really.
I mean, it's literally just cutting triangle. You take the rectangular piece of insulation, make it into squares, and then diagonally cut them to make triangles, and you just stack the triangles in your corners, and you call it a super chunk. Yeah.
Yeah, and you basically put just a little bit of like 1x molding up there that you use to wrap around the whatever fabric. And then just poke it in
you could quite easily put substantially thick insulation on that section below your screen and put some fabric over that. So all of that can be done DIY. I mean, the membrane thing, I'm a little bit surprised they said this without seeing any measurements from you, because normally
that's where I run into issues there too. I mean, unless they're looking at like the resonant frequencies of the room and saying you're almost certainly in the width ways or the length way is going to have this one frequency is going to be one of your issues. I mean, that's probably true and it probably safe bet, but at the same time, without seeing actual measurements, I'm like, well, depending on what the rest of the treatments in the room are doing, how do you know?
Yeah.
How do you know you're not going to be having you're definitely going to have an issue with that one frequency.
No, honestly,
so
I'd just go
wouldn't
super
do
chunks. I'd go super chunks. That should be quite easy to do and DIY and much less expensive. Yeah.
Instead of the tri traps, monster bass traps, sideways below the screen. I would just build a 4-inch thick.
Yeah. Or even 6-inch.
A regular trap down there, and not trap, but a regular panel down there, and put it down there.
Yep.
I wouldn't do anything other than that. Soffit bass traps in the rear corners to get bass trapping as deep as possible. Again, instead of cutting triangles, you cut squares. Then you stack it.
Or I would also just do super chunks back there. I wouldn't go any more complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it would look fine. Making smaller holes in the riser as opposed as small openings into individual joist bays would create tuned bass traps that only impact a narrow band of frequencies. So either make a large opening at the front and rear or leave it alone.
Yeah, I agree with that. They're right about that. It's like when you make the small opening, it's like the port in a subwoofer. Right, it's it's tuned to that frequency, like blowing across a bottle.
The big old thing that you used to cut like a doorknob.
Okay,
and I would put a cup just across that front face. Pull up the carpet, do it, and then put the carpet back down. You know what I mean?
Or
on both sides.
If you're doing all these super chunks and everything that we're talking about, you could just leave it alone. You really could.
I would do this last. Right now. Since that riser's already made, I would not touch that thing unless I was sure I needed to.
Agreed. I'm in favor of leaving it alone for the moment.
So since Mike told Gick that he might like to have some printed art panels on the side walls and he doesn't want his Focal Superbird sticking out, they suggested to only put the art panels in the areas behind his first row of seats and make them 6 inches thick in total. Basically, leave the second pair of side surrounds not pictured and the surround back sticking out as they are, and just have the art panels to be slightly thinner so the second row of surrounds and surround backs are just slightly proud of the art panels. And I kind of understand what's going on here, but he's really dedicated to having these things covered, right? He wants to have a clean look.
I mean, he's mostly talked about the front side surround speakers, the ones that are beside his primary front row. Those are the only ones he's actually talked about. He wants to recess those and have them hidden. The ones for the back row, which aren't in the pictures, but he'll have another pair of side surround speakers for the back row, and the surround backs, he's fine with basically leaving them on the wall where they are. They don't have to be recessed. They don't necessarily have to be hidden. So he's like, his wife, if he's going to have all these panels in that, would like some of them to be artwork, which I'm all in favor of. Gick is saying, leave it visually unobtrusive up front, and he wants it thinner on the fronts of the side walls anyway, and just sort of hide everything in the front of the room, and then have the printed panels at the back of the room, and just make them the right thickness so that these wall-mounted speakers will, just be slightly proud, slightly in front of those panels, so that you're not ruining their dispersion. I'm in agreement with all of that. I think that makes sense.
Yeah, it's fine. I got no problems with that.
Also, if you want less expensive printed panels, Acoustimac does also do printed panels at a lower price. So Gick does a dyeing. They dye their panels,
which is more expensive. Also looks better.
But looks better. Whereas Acoustimac is a printed version. Or you can get your own fabric printed with images, as long as you hold the copyright for those images. There's no problem getting it printed from a place like Spoonflower, and then you can wrap your own panels with printed artwork. Cheaper.
All right, so for the side walls at the front of the room and going all the way back across his equipment nook and just past his first pair of surrounds, go DIY and cover the entire side walls using 1x2s to make 24 inches on center frame, making the framing over the equipment nook into a hidden door, leave an air gap behind his recessed first pair of side surrounds, then fill the rest of the 2-inch deep frame with insulation and cover the whole thing with fabric. That would be like a live end, dead end sort of
a little bit, although with only being 2 inches thick, it's not going to be affecting bass, but that's about getting rid of the first reflections. And what Gick was saying is that he's got 2 rows of seating, wide seating area. That means even first reflections, if you're actually going first reflection to each seat, it's lots of spots along those side walls. So they're like, instead of trying to spot panel this, if you're going to go DIY, just you throw up some 2-inch thick, front to back thick framing. You put insulation in all of it, cover the whole thing with fabric, and you're done. Mike also mentioned that he actually wouldn't mind the fronts of his walls being even darker. Well, you can make them darker if you just cover the whole sidewall in black fabric, right? Instead of the gray that you painted it.
I'm okay with this. This is
Yeah.
what a lot of custom installers do. Basically they you have your room, they build a frame in, and they just put everything behind the frame, including the speakers, the diffusion, the absorption.
Yeah, you basically
all that
have
stuff.
false walls all around.
Yeah, and you could do that if that's really how you want to deal with your speakers and everything else. You could do this all the way around this room. Then you hide everything.
You could.
It's a lot more expensive. It's a lot of fabric, and that fabric, no matter where you order it from, is not as cheap as you think it's going to be. I mean, it's still, it's still 3 feet wide,
right?
Okay? And it's got to go floor to ceiling all over the place, and then you got to, you're going to have overlap and stuff like that. It's not going to be, perfect. So, there's some things to consider.
But honestly, I mean, other than the printing, I mean, you can't do that yourself, but you could get just fabric that's printed instead of homemade panels. The diffusers are probably worth just purchasing because he was saying he doesn't want a ton of weight on that ceiling. So if you're doing the homemade diffusers, they're usually very heavy because they're usually literally just a whole bunch of different sized blocks of wood. That's the easiest way to make them. So probably worth purchasing the diffusion. And I'm not opposed to having it in those ceiling bays at all. I think that's a good idea. But all the rest, I think you could do DIY because super chunks, some thick insulation instead of the monster base traps, the sidewalls just like they said, and then wrapping your own printed fabric. So I think all the rest could be DIY. I would
buy the printed panels because then that they're going to come out nice and straight and perfect.
The hassle of wrapping it yourself and stuff and getting the borders and the edges just right. Yeah.
So I've wrapped a bunch of panels, and I'm looking at one right now where I wrapped it too tight and the corner ripped, and it's driving me nuts. I'm the only one that sees it. No one's ever said anything about it in this room, but I see it and it drives me crazy. So if I were buying panels that were wrapped, that were that printed, I would have somebody else wrap them for me just to get them right.
Sure.
Then if you decide to do the whole, like, I'm going to just cover the entire thing with stuff, then printed panels, it becomes less of a thing that you have to worry about because you're now, you don't want to put a big, picture in here or a bunch of pictures in here because you've now added a reflective surface to what is essentially an entirely, theoretically entirely absorptive wall, room. But this might become over dead as well. So you're not going to want to fill every single bay with insulation.
But that's why having that diffusion could make a lot of sense. Yeah.
Right. And then having your printed panels, the ones that you get, suddenly don't have to be 4 inches or 6 inches thick. They can be 1 inch panel because you're just hanging it on top of a wall that already has diffusion.
Yeah, because all the stuff on your side walls could just be 2-inch thick stuff. And then you're going to have these nice big super chunks in your corners. Yeah. And you're going to have, we're saying you could have a little layer of absorption and then the diffusion in the ceiling. That you will not have your echo anymore because that's going to be a lot of covered surface.
Yeah, you might be able to hear your heartbeat, but you won't be able to have your
I think
echo.
He'd be happy with that.
So we already answered this question, but he says, do we agree with all this? What could he make as a DIY to bring the price down? With everything they suggested, the price came to almost $4,000. So yeah, just listen to what we just said.
Definitely.
So on a different topic, he has a Harmony Elite, and it's mostly worked very well. The only catch is that he doesn't always successfully turn off his projector. If he clicks help, the projector turns off. His projector requires pressing standby twice to get it to actually power down. He's tried adjusting some delays. Any easy way to fix this? Sounds like, it could be any number of things, but usually the problem with this is either delay's not right, which you said you've tried to fix, or line of sight isn't what you think it is. So
it's a Harmony Elite, so it's a hub, so it shouldn't be the issue. And
if you don't have the blaster on it someplace, put a blaster someplace where it can make sure that you're getting it.
I don't think it's that as the issue. I think what's happening, because this is when you're just on the Harmony pressing the off button, which turns everything off. And can you manually put in you can't manually put in your own commands because it's dependent on what activity you're in that is being sent off commands, right?
Right.
So I think where you would have to do this is in the individual device for your JVC projector. You would have to go to its power on-off settings, because that's part of it, the device on-off settings. And that's where you have the option of, like, the cable box. You can just say, leave this device on all the time. Never send an on and off command. And that's where you would have to reprogram it to always send the two commands with maybe a longer delay between the two standby commands. Because it sounds as though, the off command is sending standby twice, but it's not working. You press help, it sends standby twice again, but that's essentially acting as the second standby command.
Right.
And I think it just needs a longer delay between first standby and second standby.
Well, he said he adjusted delays, so he's trying to adjust
maybe he didn't do it in the actual device on-off settings. Maybe he put it...
Well, if you haven't tried that,
yeah.
and I mean, this is
or tell it to press standby 3 times or 4 times.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. All right, Wayne on Facebook. Wayne is using a Denon X4500H to power all 9 speakers in the setup. He sits about 13 feet away. This is the dude I talked about at the beginning of the podcast.
Yes.
He sits about 13 feet away from his Polk RTI, front towers and centers, 89 dB efficient, 8 ohms, and the rest of his speakers are smaller and closer, a maximum of 10 feet. How can he evaluate whether or not his receiver has adequate amplifier power? Does he need fancy test equipment? He likes to listen loud. Well, everybody who says they like to listen loud very rarely likes to listen much louder than, reference volume.
And you are, according to what he said, exactly 4 meters away, right? Yeah. So you've doubled it from 1 meter to 2 and doubled from 2 meters to 4. We know this. Yeah.
Right. So if you listened last week, you heard this whole calculation before, which I hope that you did listen last week, because this is the one I said basically the too long didn't read answer was your receiver is fine and whatever. But 89 is not inefficient by any stretch of the imagination.
Relatively efficient, although certainly not out of the realm of possibility. I'm not looking cockeyed at that. I'm just like, nope, that's a fairly efficient speaker. Yep. So, I mean, it never hurts to go over the numbers again, because not everybody knows it off the top of their head. But you take that sensitivity rating, and in this case, these are 8 ohm speaker. They're rated at 89 decibels. That would be with 1 watt from 1 meter away. So you take a measurement microphone, you play some pink noise, you put 1 watt into these speakers, and you'll get 89 decibels as you're reading. That's what we would expect from those ratings. So when you double the distance away from 1 meter to 2 meter, if you were out in a wide open field, no walls around you, you'd lose 6 decibels just from doubling your distance. But we do have walls around us. We do have some room reinforcement. And conservatively, I go with you lose 4 decibels. Not 6 in an actual room with walls and floor and ceiling. You lose 4 decibels for the doubling of distance. So I'm going to say you are 4 meters away. So you doubled from 1 to 2, from 2 to 4. You have lost 8 decibels, I'm going to say. So with 1 watt, you'd be getting 81 decibels of output with your speakers. And that's the ones that are the farthest away, your front speakers in your center. So 81 decibels. The rest of the math is that every time you double the number of watts, you get 3 decibels more output. And every time you multiply the number of watts by 10, you get 10 decibels more output. So with 100 watts, multiplied by, you added 10 once, you got 91. You added 10 again, you got 101. If you doubled that, you'd have 104 essentially full reference volume peaks. So if you could sustain 100 watts into these speakers, that's 101 decibels sustained for the whole time. And then for the short little peaks, you might require 200 watts for a peak, and that'll get you essentially full reference volume. So that's the math. So can your X4500H deliver that? Yes, it can. It can deliver 125 watts continuously into 2 speakers simultaneously all the time, all day long. And then it can quite easily deliver almost 300 watt peaks into any one given speaker for a very short amount of time. So can you get 200 watt peaks? You sure well can.
So over at AVS Forum, he found a post. First of all, stop going to AVS Forum.
Well, I'm not going to say that.
I'm going to say
just got a question and filter, and that's what he's doing. He's like, this is what I said. Let's check with Tom and Rob.
He found a post saying to expect 100% of the rated power into 2 channels simultaneous, about 85% of the power into 5 channels simultaneous, and 65% to 7 or not 40% into 9. Dude, did somebody just make those numbers up? I feel like they just made those numbers up.
Well, actually, they kind of work out. So the calculation I always go by is you got your full rated power, and yes, it says it's only into 2 channels simultaneously, 125 watts. So take that number, 125 watts, okay? And obviously that's times 2,
Right.
That's two of them,
So
250 watts. Now take the 125 watt rating and take a quarter of that. All right. So what is that? Basically 30, right? 31. Let's call it 31, right? 31 watts. You can take that 25% rating, and that's about how much power you could deliver simultaneously into the remaining speaker channels. You've got 7 other channels, and there's a 9 amplifier receiver that you're talking about, the X4500. So you got about 30 watts times 7. It's about 210 watts, plus the 250 watts or so from the 2 that are 125. And that's your like pool of watts. That's basically your pool of watts, and you can divide that by however many speakers you're talking about, 5, 7, 9, or whatever, and that's about how much power could simultaneously be delivered into all of those speakers from that pool of watts. And it works out to about these numbers, so they're not way off on that.
Okay. So Wayne understands that the real-world content will essentially never request maximum power from all speaker channels simultaneously. But is there any sort of statistical analysis to quantify how frequently a large sample of movies ever exceeds the capabilities of most AV receivers' built-in amps? Could anyone list a number to say something along the lines of only 1% of the time, or 0.1% of the time, is there ever content in a wide sample of movies that request playback levels greater than 95 dB from more than 2 channels simultaneously? Well, okay, since there's so many factors here, it's almost, the answer is no. I mean, I've never heard of such a study being done, and I don't know how you would do it, because power is not pushed. Power is requested from the speakers.
But in the recording, you could look at what is the amplitude, what is the decibel level essentially being like, because I mean you could reference it all to decibels full scale, right? So you could say how many below, zero full scale is full scale, so then it's always a negative number. So you could say in the signal how frequently so I mean like 95 dB would be minus 10 full scale. So how often are we seeing values in the signal above minus 10 full scale? And then how often are we seeing a request for above minus 10 full scale from more than 2 channels in a surround sound or immersive audio recording? I mean, it's not impossible for someone to do that and put it in a gigantic spreadsheet. I've never seen it done, but it's not impossible for someone to do it.
But even if you did, I mean, he's talking about a wide selection of movies.
Well, sure, because there might be one movie that does it, but then it's only that one movie. He's like, he's basically saying, in general, can you make the case that if you are using an AV receiver to power 7 or 9 speakers, that you will frequently need more power than the AV receiver can deliver?
I mean, just think about the movies that even like if you a large sample of Marvel movies, how many times are you hearing a extremely loud sound come from all of your speakers for a long period of time,
right? And
not just just sustained in general. You may hear an explosion that you get that first initial pop, most of which, by the way, came out of the subwoofer, and then, right? And then it rumbles, and there's people talking over the top of it after that, or screaming and yelling. This idea that all 7 channels or 9 channels or 11 channels driven simultaneously is going to be driven to reference volume is, I can't think of a case where it's done at all for any length of time.
I'll give the example here, which is that this X4500H can sustain 50 watts into all 9 speakers simultaneously. It can sustain that, which in your case is 98 decibels.
Right.
98 decibels playing all day long out of all 9 speakers all at the same time forever and ever. That's what this AV receiver can do. And he's like, well, are there a whole bunch of movies where it's requesting 101 decibels out of more than 5 speakers for a long period of time? And like, anecdotally, I'm just going to say no.
Yeah, no. Because it would be the music. That's the thing that comes out of all speakers simultaneously. All speakers are being asked to play part of it. That's the thing that would be, and never is the music played that super loud. The only time I ever hear a sound that's played out of multiple speakers for a sustained period of time at a very loud volume is like a high-pitched, like, woo, You know what I mean? Like,
And even
that's
then,
just meant to
it's
like.
not all the speakers at the same time. It's just
Well, even if it were, it wouldn't make any difference because it's the tweeter, and the tweeter doesn't require hardly any power whatsoever to get loud. So it wouldn't be.
I mean, I guess
50 watts into your tweeter. You put 50 watts into a tweeter, you get a new tweeter the next day.
I mean, I guess he's like, we just said you could legitimately have instances where it's requesting 200 watts for a very short amount of time, and we're saying, you could do that into 2 speakers at the same time. I mean, could 5 of his speakers all be requesting 105 decibels right now together? I suppose it's possible. I guess that's exactly what he's asking. How often across a wide spectrum of movies does that ever occur? It's just not enough for me to say, well, you gotta have an external amp. You gotta have a 200 watt continuous into 7 channels simultaneously. I mean, those exist. Go get a monoprice model if you want it that badly. I'm not going to say, no, I did it. I got a freaking 7-channel ATI amplifier. I'm crazy and nuts like that, and I'm in a tiny room. So knock yourself out. But
be crazy like Rob is what he's suggesting.
Mathematically,
he needs more crazy people.
Mathematically,
he doesn't
it's just
need
not
it.
There.
You don't need it. All right, Robert. This may be our last question
be.
because I'm hungry. Robert has been very curious and wanting to try some speakers with ribbon tweeters, but he lives in Arizona. He's concerned about dust and heat. Do you live outside or inside? Because I imagine you have AC. Any concern about using ribbon tweeters in a potentially dusty environment? Is there an easy way to clean them if they get dusty? Grills.
Well, that's a filter. That's a line of defense. It was interesting because David Fabricant answered this almost exact question. Somebody was asking about storage because they had stored their ribbon tweeter speakers and it had gotten dusty, and they're like, "What should I do? Because I don't want to put a vacuum against this little ribbon." Sure. That seems like a bad idea. He's like, "Well, if you could see how fast the ribbons vibrate." He goes, nothing is sticking to that short of like sap. If you're actually talking about dust, he says the first time you turn the speaker on and play something, all the dust is shaken off of it right away. Okay. So that's how you clean it. Play something.
So any concern about using ribbon tweeters in high temperatures?
Nah.
I mean, I can't think of what it would be. The
piece of aluminum foil. That's what it is.
I mean, it's basically metal.
Yeah,
right.
It is.
So.
Yeah.
I mean, are you going to be putting it in an extremely hot oven? In which case, I think I'd worry more about the veneer. Like, worry about the tweeter material.
I mean, actually, when they...
the rest of it may melt.
When they show a ribbon tweeter being repaired, the metal ribbon itself is held in place and held taut by... Essentially, it's not shrink wrap tubing, but it's that type of material where it draws in with the heat. But that's with a full-on heat gun. And the way they apply it is by applying the heat to the ribbon and allowing it to disperse the heat into those parts that shrink with the heat. Now, we're talking ambient temperatures that a human can survive, which isn't close to a heat gun being sprayed on you. So
Right. Like, heat guns are hundreds of degrees.
Right.
So
no problem.
So any other pitfalls physically when it comes to ribbon tweeters that you ought to be aware of and look out for?
Don't tear them sideways.
Yeah, I mean, I don't touch them.
Yeah, don't poke them. Don't put a toothpick through the little metal grill on the front and stab it. You will be able to make a hole.
Pretty much anything you would do to a normal, silk dome tweeter. Don't do that either.
Don't put a magnet up against it. Don't.
Yeah.
No.
Normal stuff.
Pretty normal stuff.
All right.
Oh, don't take a little the little thing you use to blow dust off a lens and blast it.
Oh, right.
They call it a hurricane, right?
Well, there's the same thing with a vacuum cleaner, right? I mean, you wouldn't want to do that either to a tweeter, to a silk dome either. Right. So it really does.
I mean, it's not even the force of the thing. It's if you get it uneven and you start twisting it, because think of it exactly like a piece of aluminum foil, right? Try to just pull a piece of aluminum foil side to side apart, like just pull it this way. You're not going to do it, right? But if you tear it, then it tears.
The guy's got
easily.
legit. I mean, I can understand where he's coming from as far as I don't know what's inside this thing, and I know it's a small piece of fabric of something, and it's it's very light, and therefore probably pretty delicate, and I'm worried about it in my harsh environment. Mm-hmm. So I can certainly see where he's coming from with the
Absolutely.
questions. There's no doubt about that. But yes, this is they'll be fine.
Yeah. But keep the grills on and take the grills off to clean the grills. Don't vacuum the grill while it's on the speaker in front of the tweeter. And that's about it. Should be fine.
I don't think I've ever vacuumed my grill. I didn't even think about that. All right, who do we got left?
We have Chris B, Phil V, Ben F, Terry G, and DJ. And then a couple of questions that came in, but I'll just say the names so that you gentlemen know that I have you, are Victor D and Steve B.
All right. We want to thank our 84 patrons over at patreon.com, including DJ and Brandon. And we want to thank Terry for talking us up to Accessories for Less.
That's right. That's patreon.com/AVRant Podcast if you would like to sign up for an automatic monthly donation. Thanks very much to our 84 patrons and DJ and Brandon, and being two of them. And Terry, thanks for talking us up to Accessories for Less. And if anybody would like to make a one-time donation, just come to avrant.com and click Support AVRant. It'll take you to PayPal.
All right. For AV Rant, I'm Tom Andry.
And I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.
Keep forgetting I don't have to turn off the other thing. I'm looking for it.
Oops. I didn't mean to do that. Well, let's see here.